Hello, I'm Fabian Rush, and I'm leading a team of remote viewers on an expedition to Jupiter's moon, Europa, to answer the question, is there life currently residing beneath the ice? Europa essentially is a big ball of ice, and because of the immense gravitational forces that are being exerted on it by the gravity of Jupiter, the moon is bending and warping, which they believe has caused the interior to heat up through friction. And this heating up, they believe, may have formed a liquid water ocean. And if you've got warm water protected by this icy shell, you might have a condition in which organisms could develop. Additionally, in 2010, Richard Greenberg of the University of Arizona proposed that irradiation of the ice on Europa's surface could saturate its crust with oxygen and peroxide, which could then be transported via tectonic processes into the interior ocean. Such a process could render Europa's ocean as oxygenated as our own within just 12 million years, allowing for the existence of complex, multicellular organisms. Between the years 2022 and 2025, NASA will be launching the Europa Clipper mission. This is a probe intended to collect samples from water vapor plumes and study them for organic materials that could indicate the presence of life. Additional NASA missions have been proposed that involve sending a probe to the icy surface and melting through to the lakes or oceans beneath. This is all being done primarily to search for life. Now, if NASA is willing to spend millions on Clipper, I'm willing to spend hundreds on remote viewers. How amazing would it be to send a remote viewer to Europa, to observe beneath the ice without melting through and disturbing the terrain and the environment? Just send the remote viewer straight down into that ocean and see firsthand, is there life? Then, decades from now, when we send real probes to Europa, melt through the ice and make observations at that point, those people can refer back to this video and say, whoa, those remote viewers were right. There's nothing under this ice, and we just blew billions of dollars. Hopefully they won't say that. Hopefully they'll be saying, those remote viewers were right. They said they found jellyfish, little fish, something like that. And it will blow everyone's mind. But all the same, this would be a huge step for proving that space can be explored in this amazing and cutting-edge way. To confirm for me that this was a viable target, I spoke with professional remote viewer Daz Smith, and here are a couple clips from that interview.
So there's so many applications you can take remote viewing. I mean, we can explore the vast, parts of the universe. We can send remote viewers on probes to distant stars and planets and stuff before you even spend hundreds of millions of dollars in spending a probe there. Because using a remote viewer will cost you thousands, whereas sending a metallic probe would cost you tens of millions. It's the limitations for this is just endless. But there just isn't the funding and the want there to develop it, which is a shame, really. I mean, it's born out of fear, because people think it being misused. But if you could just get a core of people together that want to use it for humanity reasons and research rather than for the bad stuff like spying and nefarious, looking at what your competitors are doing. I don't want to do any of that, Why can't we have a team of remote viewers like me that spent 6 months trying to find a cure for cancer? I'm sure we could do something.
Exactly. So yeah, the target I've written up, if I could share that with you now, is the moon Europa. If you're familiar already, I've written, the remote viewer is to go to the optimum time and position / location to describe and sketch any living organisms or biological activity in the liquid ocean beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon Europa.
Okay, yeah.
And so I was thinking about including an image of Europa, maybe.
Yeah. That's just for basic feedback, but yeah, it's not, it's not key.
Wow. You said earlier the thing about we could do it cheaper, and then we'd get our
Yes.
verifications when they send
Yeah.
their probes out. So that's my vision for us
Okay.
to remotely view Europa, and then this documentary and the film that I'm making, put those out there, and then in a decade or so, when they actually do it, they can refer back to our video. So
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
that's my thinking.
I think that could be doable. We just might have to I don't know. We'd have to think about it. Maybe put a time on it where we, because you tend to want the remote viewers to go to a time rather than, or a set time if you can, rather than leave it open for them to go at any point. Because that could be a on a scale of a million or 2 years kind of thing.
I thought that what if they remote view something that is a million years in the future from now, or and then the probe gets there and it's like, well, we didn't find anything.
We might want to sell it to something that's closer to the time that the probe goes there. But of course, there might not be life; they might not pick up anything at all. But by having a time that you can compare to, kind of would I think give you more accurate information than leaving it completely open.
Yeah. Thank you. So that's great feedback. So,
but yeah, that sounds like it's a viable target that I could quite easily. It's not got feedback at this stage. I mean, but saying that, we do have a certain amount of feedback. We do know that there's a planet called Europa. We do know what it's made of. We do know what the atmosphere is like and all that kind of stuff. So if they come back and say there's lots of liquid, it's cold, or blah 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 blah, I would say we have a 50 to 70% of stuff that we can verify with known feedback. The only stuff we don't actually know is what is under the oceans at this stage. But the rest, if the viewers all come back and say, oh, it's a cold place, it's remote, it's up in space, it's a planet, and below the surface, if they say all that and then they say there's life, you can kind of not take it to the bank, but you can kind of be pretty confident that, they're on target there.
Excellent. So after a delightful 2-hour conversation with Daz, I updated the target queue to read, the remote viewers will perceive the subterranean liquid water ocean/lakes of Jupiter's moon Europa and search in the optimal locations or positions for living organisms. The remote viewers will describe and sketch what they perceive. Perceptions will be limited to the present day or year realities regarding the presence of life on Europa only. Now, this was a completely blind study, and that means I didn't tell any of the remote viewers what I was tasking them to view. All I did was provide them via Facebook a target identifier, which is just 8 random numbers. In this case, they were numbers to represent the date that I was tasking. I went into this experiment with very simple expectations. I was expecting remote viewers to get back to me and say that they were cold, that they felt like they were underwater, maybe that it was dark. Maybe some of them would have had an AOL that this was under the ice of the Arctic, something like that, to give me a sense that they might have connected with the site. That was the first thing I was looking for. And then the second thing answers the questions, well, is it just a frozen, empty wasteland underwater, or do they sense biological entities? When I first started examining the results that were coming into me, I thought that no one had successfully connected with this target. But when I inspected a little closer and really started reading into what everyone was saying, there were 3 remote viewers who were telling the same story. And their stories were corroborating each other. Now, I've heard that it's possible that when you set a target for multiple remote viewers, each of them will tell a small piece of the big picture. And that is how this study seemed to work. And the story that these 3 remote viewers told me through their results completely caught me off guard. Now, upon starting their sessions, it seems that these 3 remote viewers had a choice to make. They seem to have gotten to the surface of Europa and had to choose, well, Do I go under this ice and descend and find the water and then search for microbes and perhaps a few fish? Or do I stay here on the surface and examine what appears to be extraterrestrial activity? They found UFOs and what appeared to be a mining facility. Europa is one of the smoothest objects in our solar system. This is a result of its constantly renewed surface. The icy crust is always shifting because it sits loosely over an interior of warmer water. Naturally, this shifting leads to cracks and crevices across the entire globe, which appear red or crimson in all of the images. This is a key characteristic of the surface. So, when I saw this image from anonymous viewer number 1, I became intrigued. In her own words, these are cliffs or canyons. It is a large crack in the ground. This is not due to erosion, due to water. No vegetation, no wind, reddish environment, dust, sand, rocks, alternation between cold and heat, drought. Now, much to my surprise, this area also included ruins, which in her words were off the ground, above the empty, stowed on the ground but suspended in the air, broken concrete structures, ruins of metal beams, pipes, and transom parabola. Then she asks, is this an observatory? Regarding the construction goals of the metallic ruins, she says, supremacy, conflict of races, technology research. The constructors were a race of half robots, half humanoid, human workers with light suits and oxygen. They are looking for something with radar and sonar. They probe the depth of the ground. Surveillance militias. Guardians of the territory. Small ships crisscross the entire region. I am not welcome. Next, she says, I go down the cliff. No entry or opening. Nobody, neither humans nor animals. I am looking on the surface for an opening among the ruins. Nothing. I enter the ground and I find 150 meters from the edge of the canyon and about 30 meters deep, a cavity. Dusty. A dead insectoid, about the size of a human. Jars in split glasses. Greenish residue in the bottom of a jar. A lot of sadness and sorrow. Trap, defeat, failure, loss of hope. In the sand under the jars, there is something alive. A translucent and extremely solid sphere, which seems to work with plasma, autonomous and eternal, that emits energy, waves, without particular emotions, basic functions. Mixed biological, electrical technology. Regarding the mummified insectoid, she says, worker function, hive keeper, caregiver. I approach the insectoid and take him in my arms. No resistance. He gives me the vision of what the Great Cave was when he was alive. Magnificent. Illuminated by thousands of crystals, emeralds, rubies encrusted in the walls. No infrastructure, no lake. The air is rich and healthy. Cultivation soil. Kinds of mushroom stones from which a greenish liquid is collected. This liquid is nourisher, healer, protector. It's not the same liquid as in the lake. The glass tunnel is intact. Lastly, she goes on to describe the cave. Depth difficult to evaluate. I lose the notion of distances. Heavy and charged atmosphere. Small lake about 10 meters in diameter. Thick liquid. Mixture of living and metallic elements. copper oxide and bacteria. Bridge or glass tunnel partially broken and distorted, which goes up along the wall of the cave. Let's move on to anonymous remote viewer number 2. In their words, they say green, radiant, salty, cutting through, light beam, smells like melted plastic, burning, penetrating beam, bright light energy, directed to one certain point below, to the ground. Feels like technological, with devices in the air. Their description of the location of that energy was aircraft, high-tech, shaped like a plate. Their deduction they described as Darth Vader, a UFO beaming the light to the ground. They also describe structures, many, all together, on different levels and heights. Feels like rectangular and verticals. Then they moved on to describing their subject, which they call Lightning Man. And I assume this description of Lightning Man means that this is the person that is directing the beam from the ship to the ground. And this subject is described as a gray alien. Then they make an interesting deduction and say they think of a sea of consciousness. And back to the beam of light that is coming from the aircraft to the ground, they don't feel like it's lightning, technical. And they take an AOL and say Tesla's tower. Then they return to the aircraft and describe it as military, cigar-shaped. I don't feel a danger from it, rather observing, analyzing, researching, experimenting, researching a nature, biology, surface to ground, taking samples. At a high level, hovering, aircraft, standing at the same place. Somebody is in the aircraft. It's not a drone. The team researching a climate, ecosphere, or something like that doesn't feel dangerous nor with bad intentions. The deduction here is that it is a Zeppelin or a dirigible. Collecting data, samples of surface and water. The subject is a doctor or technician. A group of researchers, scientists, specialists, official, researching and evaluating an ecosphere, and they are victorious. Applause, delightful, congratulating. Then they move 10 meters into the ground, where they find a hangar or a factory, a lot of official subjects with a laboratory, a big, roomy space without dividing walls, with a curvy ceiling. I'm moving into the hangar. Medicines, samples, fluids, chemicals. Describing the content of the hangar, they say railroad. Seems like a ladder, rocky surface, smooth, tunnel, in multiple parts, branching, cables under the ceiling, rock, concrete, marble, dark gray. Feels like 15 to 20 meters in width, 6 to 8 meters in height. Their deduction here is deep level mining. The underground processes that are happening involve men transporting something with helmets, storing boxes with forklifts, some vaccines, medicines, chemicals, analysis, and samples. And now onto anonymous remote viewer number 3. She immediately receives gestalts for liquid water, biological and man-made. Starting first with the water, she says it feels like liquid, thick, gelatinous, impregnated, luminous, blue, green, dark, contained and living, biological. The liquid biological seems like something natural contained in a man-made. It seems to be in tanks. It's worth a lot of money. She declares an AOL here of an aquarium or fish tank. It has an inner luminance, a slow, induced growth, and it feels cellular, structural, repeated, and microscopic. it has consequences and is valuable and can travel in time and space. This liquid appears to be studied by another biological, a person, and this person feels male, shaved, clothed in blue. They are indoors in a cool, white, lit environment which feels clean and sterile, with very nice surfaces to work on. The person is tall, fit, well-educated, scientifically minded, quiet, and serious. Seems to be very rigid and unwilling to share. They don't want to believe what they have here in front of them. The remote viewer says, I ask questions, but the subject is guarded. When I ask where the substance came from, they say, Golden Gate, which feels metaphorical to me. I ask what kind of environment, and I see the image of something golden or orange, and the reply is swamp sun. And here you see her images of the biological, a cathedral of growth, seeping through, greenish, silky, curved. After submitting these results, I later emailed to ask her if she could describe better for me what she had drawn in these images, and she said she couldn't really describe them, she just felt compelled to draw. So I waited for my girlfriend to get home from work, and she is a vet tech, so I asked her to take a look at these images and tell me what she saw, because she's accustomed to looking into a microscope and identifying various microbes, parasites, and single-celled organisms of all types. She thought the top and bottom images were intended to describe the motion of these microscopic organisms, that they were schooling like fish or flocking like birds in a curving pattern. Regarding the organism in the middle, she said it looked kind of like a clam. Now, when I looked at the organism in the middle, labeled number 2, I saw what looked like it could be a flatworm. Surrounding the head of this organism, toward the left of the image, I saw what looked to me like cilia, the small hairs that microscopic organisms usually use to propel themselves through the water. And toward the back of the organism, to the far right of the image, I saw what looked like 2 long flagella. Then in image number 4, she draws another image. It seems to be a continuation of the pattern that we saw above, but somehow evolved and having changed. To me, this looked like a bacterial culture that was being raised in perhaps a petri dish. Our remote viewer describes this as structured, semi-natural, gelatinous, induced, with an inner phosphorescence. Next, she continues to draw something that she describes as going in deeper. Drawing A seems fragile, segmented, eggshell textured. It seems to be long, but seems motionless and inert. My vet tech girlfriend says that this is possibly a different organism or a different life cycle stage of the same organism. Now, on a larger scale, she goes on to describe the thing that she says is like a tank. She says it contains a thick, gelatinous natural. It seems to have a thick layer on top of a darker, dotted substance. And it was expected that this substance would not do anything. But then, one day, as no one was looking, it suddenly imploded. The particles were suspended everywhere. Moreover, these particles all seem to be linked in some kind of invisible energy ray-like connection. These next drawings are close-ups on a microscopic level. They seem to be structured, trailing, and have some kind of connection. They seem to produce a luminescence. So I may have been thinking a little too small with this project, but in hindsight, I guess it makes sense. If there are bases on the moon, if there are extraterrestrial bases on Mars, possibly on Iapetus and other places in our solar system, then I guess it actually does make sense that there would be bases and mining facilities specifically on Europa. In conclusion, we touched down on the surface of Europa. We found the ruins of a mining installation near the edge of a large canyon. Drilling operations were performed using high-energy beams from UFOs, and samples were taken. Construction goals of the installation involved multiple races: greys, human, robotic humanoids, and insectoid. There were successes and tragedies. They were mining for a biological green substance that contained bioluminescent, gelatinous, microscopic organisms that were extremely valuable. Then, one day, without warning, the sample imploded and particles spread everywhere, possibly compromising quarantine. I would like to thank all of the remote viewers who participated in this study and everyone watching this free video from Future Applications for Remote Viewing. I'll now turn everything over to the Facebook groups to discuss. Thank you.